as if people needed another reminder of our unhealthy relationship with social media. And this is something that has been slowly but surely getting out there, that social media is a tool that at first everyone applauded for its ability to connect all of us. But just like with any other tool, it seems to bring out the worst in us, and we end up using it for a lot of negative things, and it ends up having negative consequences. And we've heard in the past about just how people's self-esteem goes down, how in certain parts of the world, like suicide rates are higher the more they interact with social media. And then this story comes out this week. Whistleblower says Facebook prioritized profit over hate speech. So, not really surprised when I saw this headline. What was your reaction to this?
I think for me, when I first saw these headlines, it was just, it was not surprising. And it's so funny because as you were making the introduction, I was reminiscing on the fact that I was introduced to Facebook back when we were about to graduate. And at that point, it was only being offered to a select number of schools. And it was like, what is this? And for us, we did have on campus, we did have a book that was called Facebook, which was sort of a way for us to know other classmates in our class. And then so like for me, intellectually, the concept, oh yeah, these are pictures of people who come to my school, who I get to connect and exchange messages with. That's a pretty good platform. But then when you think about the way that Facebook has become a platform for pretty much everything that we do, and I know there's things that there's a demographic breakdown between who uses Facebook, who uses Instagram, and who uses WhatsApp. But the interesting thing is that all of those three applications are now under one company, right?
Yeah.
So when you think about the amount of influence and power that you have to shape a narrative or to see or to kind of shape the narrative and also show the information not only that people want to see, but also the information that perhaps makes you the more money.
And if you recall, because you mentioned the Facebook physical book that we had in college, if you recall when the Facebook, which was initially called, when it initially rolled out, it really was just pages with profiles, a profile picture and some information about yourself. And I don't know if you remember, but within a year of it rolling out to several campuses, they introduced the live feed. And I still remember when they introduced that feed, that it reported all of it put all of your activity into this main feed that then everybody else could see because it was public. There were a lot of people that were freaking out. They were like, oh, this is so intrusive. But now that's the norm, that everybody's been conditioned to not only accept that feed as a normal thing, but even participate. And that's the one thing that hooks people. So it's definitely evolved, and the more it evolves, the more information that we give it, the more it has about us, the more it then uses it to create an even more addictive platform. And then you get to a situation where everything is highly curated. It takes it takes them like 30 minutes to get a perfect picture of their dinner with the cat next to them, and then making everything
puppies.
Yeah, or puppies. And then they push that, and then after they upload it, they probably eat their food and are not very happy. But on social media, it looks like they're having a great time. And so that aspect of it is something that we have been. There's people that have been sounding the alarm on that for a long time. But I think after the Trump election, that's when you started hearing the other group of people calling for a censorship, because before that you had bullying, you had some of the negative behavior that comes along with a social platform as powerful as Facebook. Like I said, it's going to bring out the worst in us, but you weren't really hearing the calls for censorship as much. And when I read this story and this interview from this whistleblower, part of me thinks like, okay, yeah, you want to have a platform that there's got to be some guidelines within the platform, but in our efforts to sanitize it, are we giving up too much by actively encouraging censorship? Because you already know how I feel about giving corporations, which are sometimes just extension, or they act as extensions of the government, so indirectly giving government more control. I'm very reluctant to do that because it could very easily be used against us. So if we start actively encouraging censorship, it's going to be a matter of time before another administration tries to use it against progressives, against anti-war advocates.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think to your point, even before everything that's happening now, all the information that we now have access to, I think the conservatives were criticizing the platforms for censoring conservative views or conservative posts, and sort of being, the PC police. So in some ways, you're right. I think that in some ways, Facebook represents the new virtual or digital public square. So who regulates that? And there's a private company where conversations are happening, where people are getting information or misinformation. And to what degree do we want to empower a company to say what's okay and what's not, or maybe cooperate with governments and investigations, issues of privacy, the way that perhaps they collaborate in other countries.
Yeah.
And to your point, like being able to track down the centers or people who are trying to organize. So yeah, it's certainly a double-edged sword. And social media is a type of tool that just amplifies, the good and the bad things that used to perhaps happen at a very micro level at your school or your own, little pueblito, but now everybody and anybody can see what's going on, and perhaps is not an ideal place to be at this moment in time, and how you manage that balance of the amazing connectivity, but also making sure that is a safe space to the extent possible.
And that's absolutely right, because think about the news, the nightly news, and all the sensationalized headlines, all the negativity, all of the reports about violence. Obviously, the news does that. And if you think back to a time before Facebook, that was their bread and butter, those type of stories, the scandals, the crime, because those were the things that attracted people. So in one sense, we shouldn't be surprised that those are also the same things that attract people on social media. That if you have a profile of somebody that is flame throwing, and in the figurative sense, that is somebody that's out there doing conspiracy theories, is somebody that's straddling that fine line between free speech and hate speech, that those are going to be the profiles that are going to have the most followers. And so just naturally, as you said, this is like take all of that, whatever the news tapped into to try to sensationalize stories, whatever they did to sell news, just Facebook allows you to amplify that, and it's like it's on drugs now. And in a way, we don't really know how to handle these platforms. We're not ready for them, just because they do bring out the worst aspects of people, and then they amplify them. So you could have figures that could amass millions of followers, and then they can, if they want to, with a few tweets or a few posts, they can shift all of those people and turn them against somebody else, against another group of people. And that's the type of power that you have with social media. But, at the same time, do you want these companies censoring things? Do we want to go down that path? Because, as I mentioned, they're not just gonna censor Alex Jones. They're gonna start censoring anti-war activists. They're gonna start censoring people that are exposing certain nefarious activities from some are like our secret government agencies. They'll do it across the board, depending on who's in power. And even if the Democrats are in power, they may even censor I mean, look at what they did to Julian Assange. I think this is still evolving. We're still trying to learn to live with social media. I think in the next 10 years, it's probably going to look a lot different than it does now. If the censorship advocates win, then it's going to be highly censored. And then you start talking about the ability for all of our activities to be tracked, like something similar to China, like a social credit score. And you can easily see how people that are now blacklisted on social media could also be blacklisted in other parts of their lives, like their banking, their access to things, because everything's going to be interconnected.
Wow. Yeah. Well, I think perhaps there's something that is not just censorship, but maybe there's a middle ground. And I think maybe it's an opportunity for us to consider, is this an opportunity to have a fairness doctrine apply to social media like it did back to broadcast TV? And just to give it a little bit background and on the fairness doctrine was a law that was used to be in place and that was enforced by the Federal Communications Commission that required the folks who held those licenses to present both sides of the issue and try to do so in a way that was fair, that was balanced, that provided at least two perspectives or multiple perspectives. So maybe there's a way that Facebook and other companies can try to do that. Again, I think part of the reason why the media landscape, the 24-hour cycle landscape that we now find with Fox News on one side, CNN, MSNBC, and all the others, is because after the doctrine was removed back in, I believe it was the early 80s or late 80s, early 90s, that we sort of started, retreating to our own ideological camps.
It just became political commentary disguised as news.
Yeah.
So CNN, MSNBC, they're sideload, and then they just cater to that particular demographic. But, talking about the fairness doctrine, the challenge that you run into is that a platform like Facebook, Twitter, that's true democracy right there, in the sense that you have equal representation, equal ability for people to express their opinions. And it's really hard to impose certain rules and guidelines when you don't have like centralized entities that are funneling the information out to the masses. You could have a fairness doctrine when you had news corporations, because news corporations are entities that you can hold responsible. And how do you apply a fairness doctrine when you have 1 billion people that are actively sharing their opinion on Facebook, and it's the ones that are more insightful, like potentially inciting violence. It's the ones that are more acting like demagogues, the ones that are using fiery language, using scapegoating, using those typical tactics that a lot of leaders in the past have used, those that tap into their charisma. Like, how do you prevent these individuals from amassing millions of followers and then misusing that? Or I have a problem with the term misinformation, because now these days misinformation even gets used to classify things that are accurate. For example, again, the anti-war activists. Let's say somebody's saying, here's an article as to why we should not invade Syria. Now it's very easy to label that misinformation. They'll just say, you're just an Assad apologist. You're working with the Russians. This is Russian misinformation or something. So it's very easy to label things that are actually non-misinformation as misinformation. But that doesn't mean, though, that there's not a lot of nonsense on social media, and that there are a lot of people that use that and exploit that to their advantage. So you do have that problem. But again, the question becomes, how do you deal with it? Do you try to go for a type of censorship that is going to also potentially backfire? And that's what I'm saying. I don't think we've really thought this all the way through, or we just, you're not going to find the solution by just talking about it. I think just through trial and error, we're going to get to some type of balance. And I don't really know what that is. I don't know if it means just let everybody say whatever they want to say and whatever happens, or we're going to censor everyone. And then these platforms, yeah.
I think the invisible hand of the social media market will correct itself
I don't know, man.
eventually.
I don't know. Some of these things keep me up at night sometimes.
No, yeah, I mean, and once you kind of bring, I mean, and that's why when you think about our First Amendment and the power of the Constitution and some of the other values and provisions in there, when you think about free speech, and you're right, I mean, it's having that opportunity to express your views, to learn those views, and decide how it is that you want to advocate or present your views on that. And yeah, it's difficult, and I think in some ways there is some individual responsibility as to what, you know, what news sources am I using, what am I believing,
Mm-hmm.
am I being allowed myself to be manipulated. So yeah, there's a lot of factors that go into it, and I think it is a complicated, very complicated issue, but something that we need to wrestle with because of what's going on, because of what the whistleblower, some of the information they shared, as well as I know that today, again, there was or on October 4th, there was a
Yeah, an outage.
outage. There you go, of the services, and then you realize like, oh my God, for a few minutes I cannot post a picture of my cute puppies on Instagram.
Or my salad.
Oh my God, on my salad. But no, but then it becomes like, oh my God, like it's interesting. It's kind of like when you don't have internet and you try to think, okay, what am I going to do now? Like, there's nothing to do.
Yeah.
How am I going to do anything?
Yeah. People are so addicted now to these social platforms. I mean, Twitter was still up, so I'm sure people went on Twitter and got their fix there.
And TikTok.
Yeah, yeah, TikTok too. Well, before we wrap it up, I wanted to read this earlier, but I didn't get a chance to. But let's remember that what the main concern was here of this whistleblower. She said Facebook prematurely turned off safeguards designed to thwart misinformation and rabble rousing after Joe Biden defeated Donald Trump last year, alleging that contributed to the deadly January 6th invasion of the U.S. Capitol. So the main concern here again is that Facebook is not applying enough censorship. So again, this is why, at least I was saying that I'm concerned about going down this path, because while it may seem like the right thing to do right now, we just don't know how this is going to be used against us in the future.
I believe later this week she's going to be providing testimony before the Senate. I think it's something that the Senate will look into, sort of the regulatory bodies. And I think it's also now something that we as consumers have to think about what power do we want to give these types of companies that have, I mean, access to so much of our information, what we like, what we don't like.
Well, just stop using them.
That's true.
Don't give them that power. Just use
another. Then miss out on everything that's happening online. Come on, man. I got major FOMO.
All right. I think we'll wrap it up here. If you all out there enjoy our content, make sure to check us out. We are Brown Perspective. We're on YouTube, Instagram, Twitter.
How ironic.
Yeah, how ironic. Yeah. And we're at the town square also on Sundays for those that want to not use those platforms. All right. Funny. Nos vemos.
Ciao.